So for today's quick and dirty reviews, we're talking about a girl who can see ghosts, a group of teenage witches in which one of them makes a fatal mistake, and a story with 4 alternate endings. So stick around to see what it's all about. I didn't mean to kill Josh Harper. Really, I didn't. It's just that I was nervous, and condoms are more complicated than I was expecting, and one thing led to another, and, well, now there's blood everywhere, and he's dead. And thus begins When We Were Magic, written by Sarah Gailey. So our main character is a young girl named Alexis who goes upstairs with a boy during an after-prom party with the intention of having sex with him and losing her virginity. Well, things don't go quite that far, however, because Alexis, a witch, somehow ends up killing Josh by accidentally exploding his penis. She has no idea how it happened. It just happened. So in a panic, she calls her 5 other witch sisters, friends of Alexis who also have powers, to help her to figure out what to do next. She is, after all, in a room with a dead boy and blood is everywhere. So after the girls cast an unsuccessful spell to get rid of the body, they figure out that the only way is to distribute the body parts among each girl to get rid of. So the girls leave the party, each carrying a duffel bag, and the rest of the book follows the 6 of them as they try to get rid of what's left of poor Josh. So this was quite a fun book, as each of the friends had to deal with the repercussions of the spells, and there were indeed severe consequences. But I thought the real magic of this story was in the friendships between the girls, which I felt was a focal point of this story. I really enjoyed the deep bond of trust and friendship between this special group of friends, and how they stood by each other no matter what, even murder. Well, accidental murder in this case. Now, what I also enjoyed was how each of the girls had different powers, different specialties, if you will, and none of them understood where they came from or how their powers worked. Now, these were not hereditary powers with an elder around to teach them how to use them. That's to say, there really isn't a magic system in this book per se, and that they pretty much had to learn as they went along, which lent an interesting aspect to their story, especially given that their magic was extremely unpredictable, as we saw at the beginning of this story. There was also a female-female romance between 2 of the girls, which I enjoyed. Actually, there was a lot of representation in this novel, sexuality, race, and identity. Alexis was also raised by 2 gay dads, so yeah, I really enjoyed all the diversity in this novel. Now, note that this is not a fast-paced, action-packed novel. I actually thought that the storyline moved a bit slowly. It was more of an examination of the characters rather than about the plot. So all in all, it's a compelling, somewhat dark, witchy novel about self-acceptance, friendship, and magic that goes horribly, horribly wrong. Though I wish the story hadn't started out with a boy's exploding penis, but that didn't really set that well with me. But that aside, I think I ended up giving this book 4 stars. It was a very enjoyable read. So the next book that I'm chatting about is a book entitled The Bridge by Bill Konisberg, and it's kind of glary. So it has the library's shiny cover on it. So I'm a huge fan of Bill Konisberg, so I was really excited to learn that he was coming out with a new book. So this one was certainly quite an intense and raw read. So it follows 2 teens, Erin and Tilly, 2 strangers but who end up at the same time on the George Washington Bridge, both with the intentions of jumping. So Erin is gay and is suffering from clinical depression, and Tilly has just been ghosted by her boyfriend and has been publicly humiliated in an online bullying event. So, in this book, there are 4 scenarios that could play out. Tilly jumps, but Erin doesn't. Erin jumps, but Tilly doesn't. They both jump, or neither of them jump. So what's interesting about this book is that it explores all four of those outcomes in a diverging storyline kind of format, which is something I typically enjoy. So that is to say, the story plays out all four scenarios, allowing us to see the fallout and repercussions of each decision on everyone in their lives. So, it's funny, I went into this not knowing anything about this book because Bill is an auto-read author for me. But when I moved on to the second scenario, I thought, wait, what? Isn't Tilly dead? Didn't she kill herself in the first part of this book? And it was this point that I read the blurb, and then I had that aha moment. So we end up seeing all four of those scenarios play out. So to say that this novel is powerful is an understatement. As you can imagine, any novel with the theme of suicide at its core is no doubt raw and heartbreaking, and this novel is no exception. Though it was certainly tough to read in places and definitely an emotional roller coaster, it was also compelling as each section laid out the various possibilities of events following each scenario. So in the story, the author delves into themes of mental health, bullying, shame, body shaming, body image, there's parental neglect, family, loneliness, and of course, death by suicide. But I felt that at no point does the author romanticize suicide, but instead shows us the brutal results of such an act and how it can affect so many others. Now, given that this is an exploration of these four different scenarios, there's really not any closure to this story, as all of the stories end up in an open kind of way. So then it's basically up to us to decide the outcome of each story. So I'm really glad that the author saved this scenario in which neither Aaron or Tilly jump for the last story in the book, which ends the novel in a hopeful and positive manner. So the message at the core of these four stories is kind of a wake-up call, maybe even a personal message to anyone who has or has ever had suicidal thoughts. There's no ideation here, but instead, the author attempts to show us that things will indeed get better, as well as illustrating how utterly devastating the death of a loved one by suicide can be for family and friends. I also think that these four stories create an often much needed conversation around the topic of depression and mental illness in general. In the case of one of the characters, it's discussed about how exhausting it is to keep a smiling face when the darkness inside threatens to overwhelm you and pull you down. So, yeah, the events that kicked off each scenario was not only absolutely fascinating, but also eye-opening. And I felt that the author did an excellent job of bringing these events to life for the reader. Now, even though we get the same story after the events of the George Washington Bridge, the book is not at all repetitive because each decision that the teen makes sets off a chain of entirely different events. And the ripples and repercussions of each person's decision in the story really made for fascinating reading. I felt that the section in which they both jumped was especially powerful, and the author took it to the next level by showing the hole that they left, not only now in the present, but also in the future. So here the author shows us how far into the future the ripples of their decision can reach. For instance, the book introduced us to the people that they were supposed to fall in love with. People who now felt like something was missing from their life, something that they couldn't quite put their finger on. So here we see the effects not just of the people they knew, but also the people they should have known. So yeah, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. So again, this book is not an easy read by any stretch of the imagination. It's dark, heavy, sad, and gut-wrenching, and the grief of the story really jumps off the page. But it's also hopeful in that there's always another option, and in this book, we explore all of those options. So yeah, very, very powerful book, and definitely a 5-star read for me. And the last book I'm going to talk about is entitled Elatsoe, written by Darcy Littlebadger. So this book is kind of difficult to classify. It's kind of a speculative fiction, alternate reality, paranormal, murder mystery, I guess. So the world of this story is mostly identical to ours, except that it is no stranger to magic, and discussions about monsters, magic, ghosts, and heroes of legend are not unusual. There are also vampires who have pretty much been accepted by society, and even fairy rings, which serve as a mode of transportation. Anyway, the story follows a young Lipan Apache girl named Elatsoe who has the ability to raise the ghosts of animals. She could probably raise the ghosts of humans too, but that is something that is never done. She even has a ghost dog named Kirby, and the ghost dog was actually a lot of fun in the story. So the skill of raising ghosts was passed on to her, but through the women in her family. In fact, her 6th grade grandmother was quite a legendary hero. So, Elatsoe's cousin Trevor has just been killed in an automobile accident, but he appears to her in her dreams and informs her that his death was no accident. It was murder, and in fact he even names his murderer a man in Willoughby named Abe Ellerton. And in the dream, he then asks Elatsoe to ensure that justice is done and to protect his family. So she ends up investigating the odd little town where her cousin's murderer lives, and in the process unearths some pretty dark secrets. And she soon discovers that the murderer in question is a key figure in a much larger and more dangerous web of conspiracy. So what I especially loved about this book were the numerous indigenous stories that everyone told and how they were seamlessly intertwined with the plot. It's clear here that the concept of story is a key theme in this book, and I enjoyed how the stories about 6th grade rendered her immortal. I especially love the tales about her and her ghostly mammoth. Elatsoe's character is also very lovable and real. She's strong, delightfully nerdy, confident, and never doubts her ability to succeed. Her touch of sarcasm and sometimes biting wit endeared her all the more to me. She's also proudly asexual, so I enjoyed that rep in the story as well. But what really worked for me in this novel was the strong circle of support that Elatsoe has around her, including her parents, her friends, and of course her ever faithful and protective ghost dog. And as I mentioned, her relationship with the ghost dog was absolutely awesome. In fact, all of the secondary characters in this book were well fleshed out and vivid, and I enjoyed getting to know all of them. They were also quite riveting in their own right, such as her fae friend and another character, I think it was her friend's sister, who's in love with and hopes to marry a vampire. Additionally, I love the fact that no matter how far out Elatsoe's experiences are, her parents and friends never doubt her or question her. At no point does anyone ever think that she's lying or fail to show her the utmost respect. So this book has a plethora of riveting themes such as grief, loss, family, the exploitation and genocide of indigenous people, colonialism, murder, greed, racism, and so much more. I especially enjoyed the fact that this book focused on indigenous culture and its traditions, and we got to see those traditions firsthand in the everyday life of Elatsoe and her family and friends. So yeah, this is a wonderfully written, magical story with phenomenal world building and a cast of realistic and lovable characters. The illustrations in this book are also quite lovely as well. Every chapter features an illustration. So, did you like this video? If so, please click the like button below, as that really helps my channel out. So that's about it for this instance of quick and dirty reviews. As always, I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support, and I'll talk to you all in the next video. Roger and out.